So welcome everybody. We are going to do things as usual, a little bit differently today, just to experiment and shake things up a bit, but ultimately come back to this idea of value. So my first question this morning for the group, because you know we like to get interactive here, is actually about what Kelly just talked about, which is the whole idea of video on, video off. So for those of you that have video off right now, you are going to have to answer these questions in chat. Oh, we've got some people turning it on. Is how many of you, and there is no wrong answer here, how many of you keep your video on always in all of your virtual experiences with people and organizations? Or is it just because I've yelled at you that you keep it on here? So some of you guys, so some of you are keeping it off. Okay, here is and also looking at the gender makeup of our group this morning, I'm also going to go there on the gender thing. Here is a question that I have put out to the world today. I actually just posted it on LinkedIn and on Twitter. So if you want to participate also publicly in the answer, I would love that to happen, because I put a poll up. Well, actually, I'm not sure I finished on Twitter. No, I just put it out on Twitter. But here is my question. I think that the act of turning off your video is making you pay what I am now calling the invisibility tax. It is the virtual equivalent of being on the conference call line versus being inside the room. Because here is what I am seeing because I have hosted events with lots of people all the time. I can't choose to participate somebody who doesn't have their camera on. It's impossible. It's not impossible. It makes it infinitely harder to see the potential of an opportunity. And as most of you know, because you've been on these calls before, you know that joining in and participating is a really good idea, because then you get one-on-one attention and cool things happen. But we can't choose you if we can't see you. And here's the other thing, as women, I really worry that we are turning off our cameras because we don't have our makeup on, or we don't have the right outfit on, or there might be a kid losing their bananas in the background, or our background doesn't actually look as nice as we want it to look. How much of this resonated with any of you? Were you like, what are you talking about? This is absolute nonsense. A little bit. I think context matters. But I do worry both for folks that we are turning our cameras off so that people don't have to see our stuff. And in the process, we are not getting chosen. And I'll tell you, I have done lots of calls with guys, and they do not seem to have a problem showing me all of their crazy in the background. And yes, they don't have to worry about makeup or any of that sort of stuff. Not that everybody does. It's your life. It's your choice. But it's just an idea out there. And something for you to think about, not only as an individual as you're going through things, but also for those of you that are in leadership positions. I am genuinely curious if I am the only person who's starting to notice this pattern, especially on gender lines, but then also just the question on what is happening with people in general on calls. So just something to think about. Now, the other piece I want you to think about is I certainly came to the table to ask this question this morning because it's what's been bothering me this morning. But this is, and what I just did was a perfect example of using experimentation to test out ideas. Because in this world of work that you're on, and I know you guys, we've got a lot of familiar faces that have come back today, you already know that I believe that the value of you is your ability to think in the future, and that your ability to think, your brain time, is actually the product that you are selling to people all day, every day, and they are choosing or not to buy it from you. You are also choosing or not to sell it to them, but that is what we're doing. And so if you're the product, you are also the product lead for the product of you. And how many of you have been in the product development process in the companies or organizations that you've worked with and for? Several of you, right? And part of your job as the product lead is to understand all of the features and requests of your client set, right? And then to work with the developers, which in this case is you, the developers to build out all of these feature sets. And what's also true about that is how people recognize those different features, how they describe them, how they see them are all just a little bit different. And one feature may be described differently by different people, and it's your job to figure out how that same thing is. It's also your job to communicate to them about how the features are evolving and changing, and where are they in the priority queue, and writing customer stories about all of that. And none of that can happen without conversations and beta testing and experimenting with your product, right? Does this all sounds familiar? And so I come back to this idea that really you should be doing this all the time with you. And I just did it with all of you guys. And I'll tell you 99% of the work I do here is all based on me having conversations with people and going, I think this is a thing. Do you think this is a thing? Do you see this pattern? How does it make you feel? And all of the questions that come along with it. And as I've been thinking about this whole idea also of how do you build your career? How do you do work that both equally recognizes and taps into your unique value and allows you to grow and learn and all of these sorts of things? When I look at my own career and why I was successful in doing all of the crazy stuff that I did, it was because this idea of experimenting and trying out new things was such a common thread for me along the way. And it started with a couple of core things that I know about myself. One, there's nothing I love more than getting to build a new thing. I will probably use a recipe of somebody else the first time around, but I then come in and go, how do we mess with a recipe? How do we experiment with things? It probably is why when I started out my university career, I actually started to get a degree in chemistry because I was like, wow, that really is experimentation, right? So one, I love building a new thing. And if you get to blow it up, bonus points for me. Two, I will openly admit that I get bored really easily. I am a big monster of change, and I'm all like, what is new? What is happening? What are on the edges? What are all of this stuff? And so recognizing that when I get bored, I get kind of useless and I am not good at my job. Third, that in my world, I love to meet new people. I love having new conversations. I love learning things. I think everybody is a genius, and really the opportunity is to learn their genius from them and then tell other people. I think you've heard all of that sort of thing. And then last but not least, as you heard on that, the last thing I've learned about myself in my entire career was that I do love to learn new things. Much to my team's I think frustration some of the time. The expression, I like to understand how the sausage is made, is a phrase that comes out of my mouth an enormous amount. And so not only do I like to understand why something is built, but I like to understand how. And Kylie, who is not here today because she is out doing some other stuff, will tell you that I am constantly pushing her in the deep end of, why don't you go figure this out and figure out how to do something, because I think the learning process will be great for you. Kelly, who is our co-host today, is getting the new step of that process. And I know those of you that have actually worked with me directly know that I'm actually kind of known for pushing people in the deep end and going, why don't you take a stab at that and figure it out? Because it's in the learning of new things that we actually grow and change. And so as I thought about this whole idea of experimentation, I realized that this is something I naturally do in how I have managed my career path. And it's fundamentally why I have gotten to do all sorts of disparate, different, slightly crazy things. And just to give you an example, I think one of the more crazy things is I flew to Beijing, China once and had to do a 2-day sales training conference where I was the host and didn't speak a word of the language, and actually had to train the Chinese, Japanese, and Korean sales teams at the company I was working for at the same time. We had this very crazy UN translating thing. Then you add the cultural layers of crazy that got on top of that at this conference center about 2 hours outside of Beijing. While I certainly was the teacher in that experience, I learned a fantastic amount. And I would not have gotten that opportunity had I not experimented with other teams first, and also put my hand up and said, well, I can do that. I could go do that. Let me try it out here. Let's see what happens. Because what got me the opportunity to go to China and meet some amazing people was because I practiced and I showed value early on with the team in the United States, and then modeled that it was also possible in Europe and in Australia, which then meant that the teams in China, Japan, and Korea all said, well, we want some of that magic too, which then gave me the opportunity. And my guess is lots of you guys, if you were given the opportunity to travel overseas and do something different, like those are the sorts of things you're like, well, how does somebody get that opportunity? And it's building value and ideas through experimentation over time. So there can be a really big payoff. Now, I will also say, I had no plan at the beginning of my entire how do you experiment that I wanted to go to China and teach 3 different countries how to sell products where I had no experience about the culture at the time, and or how to speak any of the languages. That was not my goal. So as you're thinking about this idea of experimentation and building your career, I challenge you that, like a scientist, experiments have a theory about what is going to happen at the end, but they are not beholden to it. It's the actual part of the experimentation process that allows you to find the insight at the end of the day. Big idea, small statement there. The other piece that I also threw out there about the beauty of experimentation is what is true about an experiment is that you cannot fail, ever. There is no right and wrong answer when it comes to an experiment, right? There is a learning. And by framing what it is you're doing as an experiment, as opposed to there's a right and wrong answer, not only do you give yourself permission to learn something new, or to find out some new insights, or to blow something up, which sometimes happens. You're also giving the people who are buying your time the ability to do that too. So as we're thinking about this experimentation idea, I wanted just to kind of share some of these ideas and share some of that thinking, because I see this idea of experimentation happening at every level. And as I said, like I literally, I experiment almost every day with something. Because I find that the value of doing so not only pays me back, but pays other people back around me all the time. So I also have a theory that every single one of you has used experimentation in your career to date. And part of the challenge around this is to recognize those and to share those stories with others. So I would like to throw out to the room real quick, so you don't just hear JOANNA'S stories. Who has used experimentation in their career already today? Well, already professionally. Quing, you had your hand up. Why don't you? Well, I'd love to hear how you have. Well, let's start with why. Why do you use experimentation rather than anything else? What happened there?
So I use experimentation with end goal. I want to be more influential. I want to help the society, help, in my particular science background, I want to improve patients' lives. To be able to get there, I have to experiment my different career options along the way. So after getting, PhD degree from basic science, there's a long way I can get there to reach that goal. To be able to get there, experiment transition into a different field more related to human research, not just animal models. So I did that. After that, I was able to get a job in a molecular diagnostic company. That doesn't work out well, doesn't fit my curiosity expanding mindset. So then I work in a pharmaceutical company right now, still in the science function. But to be able to get that product to the patient, to the market, just science background is not sufficient. So I'm now experimenting, with new product planning functions, thinking about can I go into marketing in the future. So just keep experimenting to be able to reach my ultimate personal mission.
Yeah. Which is that your ultimate personal mission is the improve patients' lives statement.
Yeah, and also being influential.
Yeah. Well, so talk to me about this. You want to be influential. What do you mean by that?
Meaning I can be the person in the room, be the decision maker, and people respect me and hear me, and we can achieve a common goal because under my influence.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to give you a little bit of feedback on your positioning because I think there's a gem in what you said, and I'm unpacking this so you can all hear this. And then there's a roadblock in what you said. And I really love that you were upfront and honest with me about what it is you want, because I think when you're going through the process of figuring out how to help other people understand why you are awesome and what it is you have to add, understanding that while it's like understanding who you are and what it is you want, you guys have heard me say this a lot, is super important, because if I'm the fairy godmother a moment, I've got to know where it is you want to go. But also recognizing that in that process, other people are buying you, and why they care and what is their decision making is really important. So in the area of your desire to be influential and be the decision maker, all good. Absolutely own your ambitious and be ambitious. Does anybody else care why Quing, care about why it's important for Quing to be ambitious? I get why we need, I'm trying to phrase the question. If you were buying Quing's time, would you care that she was wanted to be influential, or is it kind of expected standard operating procedure? Yeah, it's kind of standard, right? So absolutely, I want every single one of you to be ambitious as all get out. You have my permission. I want you to have that. But on the why would somebody else care, generally people don't. And I'll give you a really great example. When people interviewed with me at Pandora many years ago, one of the most common things I would hear from a team of people who were not going to be musicians and or music analysts was, I really love music. And I'd be like, well, you're a human being, right? Of course you love music. Most people do. And I said, but how does being a lover of music actually help you do your job and add value to this organization? I love that this is important to you, but I could give a crap. Now, I did give a crap, but not really. And I say that because it's like, what is important in your buffet of things to talk about? Now, what I thought was really interesting about the narrative of experimentation for you is you just gave yourself, and I don't know if the rest of you heard that, but you gave yourself a beautiful architecture for talking about your career timeline and how you made professional decisions without saying, I got bored and I quit a job, or I didn't like something, although it didn't fit well was an interesting one. But you created what was a really nice narrative about how you continue to think about this idea of your impact being able to improve patients' lives with your curiosity and ability to do new things in the future. And there was a very consistent thread about as I've worked through my career, I keep looking at where am I curious and how can I improve patients' lives, which then ties together all of your jobs, while on paper they might not, in a way that is uniquely specific to you. Do you guys hear what I was talking about? That's a really consistent thread. So especially for those of you that, whether you're doing this because you're looking for a new job, or you understand that you need to actually teach your leadership team or your management how to talk about why you're awesome. This is the experimentation narrative is also a really helpful tool for doing that. So thank you, Quing. That was a really great example that I was interested to what the answer was. Does anybody else have an example of where they've experimented? And let's just do like, what was one experiment that you did that gave you a surprising result? Lee? We can't hear you. We're going to need you to unmute. Well, you are unmuted, but can you unplug your headset? Maybe that's the problem. No, from your computer. Oh, there we are. I see the connecting to audio. We're going to get it in a second. There we go. Still not, you're still muted. Oh, the fun of technology.
There we go. Yeah,
hooray.
Okay. The one, the Lee Luca block that doesn't have a picture is the one that is the audio. And so I'm talking like into the phone, so there may be an echo. So anyways, I think that what I was going to say is that I have been in high tech for like 25 years, and well, probably 20 years. And I switched over to philanthropy because I wanted to be able to like use volunteering and helping the community and all that. And so that was my experiment. I didn't really realize that the mindsets of those different organizations and just the way business practices between those are so very, very different. And so, yeah, that was my experimentation.
Awesome. And does it make you, like I sit here and I say, as you're thinking about how to solve problems in the future, though, do you find that you pull skills from both sets of language and both, like you had an early career experiment and then a pivot? Do you find yourself bringing both to the table as you're teaching other people how to work with you?
I am, yes, and I'm having to adapt a lot to the philanthropic piece of it, because it's more academia. It's not as get stuff done. It's more collaborative, like consensus. All these different things that for a bottom line business of a startup aren't the key ingredients. So yeah, I'm the one having to do the pivoting, I think, more than
it's fun and always interesting. I think this is, there's so many research studies out there about how it's really good, not only for our brains, but also for our future, to learn a second language. And we often assume that second language is literally a second language, like French or Cantonese or who knows what. I actually think British people and American people speak two different languages. And I speak both fluently. I kind of flow between the two. But what I also think is true is that business models and companies speak different languages too. And really thinking about what is the language that your organization speaks as you are having experiments is a really good insight, Lee. I mean, thinking about like, how do they measure success? What are the words that they understand? How do I teach them things as you're experimenting? Because remember, as you're experimenting with something, or when you're explaining it to somebody, what you're trying to do is both give somebody an idea that is unique and original, but also recognizable. You'll see my little pyramid happening again, but recognizable so that they understand. And so as you're thinking about experimentation, this idea of, while your idea is all about you and is awesome, It's actually not about you at all. It's about how does the other person react to your experiment or to you or to your idea. And so how do you think about who your customers are in that experience, and why would they care? What language, thank you, Lee, do they speak? What are their measures of success? How do they think about it? All of those questions come into play as you go through something. So speaking of, I actually, and if you all should have, and if you haven't, I know Kelly has dropped it in the chat, we should have a toolkit available to you all. And I actually want to walk through the toolkit a little bit more clearly this time and actually talk through, and I'd love you, if you can, excuse me as I get the hiccups all of a sudden, to actually go through the process and take a use case through the document. So not only do you have the toolkit for future use, because you've got an electronic version, but you've actually got a real example that we'll go through. And we are going to do a little bit of back and forth on this. So plan to volunteer. Okay, so this is how, when I say like, how do you experiment? How do you think about it? This is how I think through the process and get it set up for success. And I do have a formula, of course, for this. So first things first, if you've decided to do an experiment, it's because, like me, you're a little bit bored and you want to build something new and you want to test it out at the same thing. So the first thing I always ask is, what would be fun for me? And it's not, what does my boss want so I can get promoted? What are other people telling me? I literally start in a complete and utter place of what's in it for me, what would be fun for me, what am I curious about, what am I excited about, what am I all like, this is super interesting, I want to find out more. And seed plant on this, I have an announcement of an opportunity at the end of this call for somebody to help me with an experiment, because I have found something that is fun and I want to experiment on and I need y'all's help. So FYI there. So, all right, I'm going to put people on the spot for a second. Ankur, can we get you off unmute? I want to hear from you today. Okay, so in your world, this does not have to be professional. What are you curious about?
What am I curious about professionally, or?
No, whatever, it doesn't matter.
Okay. I am definitely become much more curious about fitness, health, nutrition. You know, I guess since I had my kids, I've been curious about nutrition. So yeah,
Okay. And is being curious in that space fun for you, or is it, I want my kids to survive sort of thing?
I think it's more, it's not so much fun. It's more about, doing, not being, stupid about life, or, just making sure that I make the most of life.
How very adult of you. I know. I wish I could eat chocolate cake all day, and I'm not a kid anymore, but I like the idea. Okay, so now let's, so if nutrition is health is one of them, but I think the intersection we're looking for is, what is fun for you and what are you curious about? And this can be professional or otherwise, but as you're thinking about it, I don't want you to think about like, how do I manifest the future me first? Is there something that resonates with you?
So what is fun for me and I'm curious about it? I think these days it is startups.
Okay.
I recently started getting exposure to startups through my work. And my company would, essentially they were strategic alliances, and this was a project opportunity that I sought out for myself. It's not part of my job. It's essentially a volunteer thing. I reached out to somebody. I was curious about what they were doing, and they mentioned that they do this, and I was like, hey, I have some time and I would love to help you out. And in the process, I met probably, 4 or 5 different startups, and sometimes we ended up doing something with them, and a lot of times we didn't do much. But just the process of seeing what all are people doing, what different ideas come to mind for folks when they start their entrepreneur journey, and that is fun for me. And I am definitely very curious about how people come up with business models, how to monetize something that they have a natural advantage towards, and that I think is definitely something that I find fun.
Okay, awesome. So here's my question for you. Does anybody, well, actually, let me double check because I can't remember. Are you looking for a job or do you have a job?
I'm looking for a job, and I'm actually looking in the startup world for it.
Okay, well, but are you working for anybody right now?
Yes, I am.
Okay, just out of curiosity, do they know you're looking?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so it's a good, you are consciously uncoupling from your current employer. It's all good. So here's my question. Does your current employer know that you're doing this whole personal experiment around startups and learning about them and all of that good sort of stuff?
Yeah, they do.
They do? Okay, good. Is this because they know you're doing this for the job, or is there a opportunity for a deliverable back to the organization as a whole?
Actually, there isn't a direct opportunity to deliver back to my current team. Essentially, the way it started out was, there was little bit started becoming, a situation where my role or my team's role was starting to shrink, and that started giving me a lot of sort of opportunities for open windows, in my schedule, and that's how I was like, okay, how can I use this to my best advantage? And that's what I was, and but I say to my best advantage, but essentially, there was a lot of curiosity about like how this organization, the product development team actually works, and I don't think I have a role or opportunity to be in that anywhere in that department, I guess. But what this particular, I guess, work stream that they work on is very, very interesting for me.
Okay. So this sounds like it was a bit of a personal adventure.
Yeah.
But so I sit here and I'm doing this because I want to unpack this for everybody. As you've been listening to Anka talk about her story, there is and I'm not sure, I'm curious to if you were intentional about this or not, but there's a whole value story buried in everything that you just said. And a value story that does a couple of things. So one, because this was fun and you were just curious and you're currently clearly not in a startup, I always sit here and I go, so remember, while it's about you, it's not about you. I put myself in your manager's shoes. And while I'm probably super sad that you are moving on, I am a super supportive manager and we date jobs, we don't marry them, right? So the fact that you're moving on is all good. But because you're doing this, if I knew, so they know that you're doing this startup thing, my guess is your boss is kind of saying, oh, that's good, totally fine. They can do what they need to do. This is not a problem. Imagine if you flip that around and said, look, yes, I'm doing this thing and it's really interesting. But here's the thing. When I think about the Venn diagram of my value in this organization that I am still part of today, I have a ton of context and insight into how this organization works. And in a minute, I'm going to have some context and insights about how the startup world works, of which our current organization doesn't have a ton. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so what I'd like to deliver to you just as a gift, and it's and I notice I'm going to say an experiment. So this is a bit of an experiment, AKA you can't fail at this, is actually doing a bit of a debrief with you about where I see opportunities for you to have insights from the startup world that might work because I have the context of our current state. And what that starts to do is one, not only provides value, one would hope, to the organization, because my guess is you already have insights that would be helpful to your company. But 2, starts to teach your former boss about who the new thinking you is, because who is the first person these startups going to call for a reference check, right?
Yeah.
Even if they don't tell you they're going to do it, there will be the backdoor conversation. You always get the call. 3, it's going to start giving you practice opportunities to talk about where your experience in the past aligns with what it is you want to do. And remember, that's the thing that people want to buy from you. And then last but not least, and I think this is a critically important thing that we often don't talk about in the whole career adventure thing, is lots and lots of people talk about your first impression. I actually think your last impression is the most important thing that you can leave an organization with, because that is the thing that they remember. And thinking about what is the message and gift that I want to leave as I exit. And that's why I call it conscious uncoupling as opposed to quitting a job. Because how do you think about what is the story you are leaving people with? And I think you've all seen, especially those of you that are in kind of corporate jobs, there's always people kind of coming and going in organizations, and there's people who you're like, oh, we miss them so much and they were awesome and I wonder how they're doing. And then there's people who you're like, don't let the door hit you in the ass on the way out sort of situation, right? However tumultuous your departure might be, really thinking about how do I make sure that from my vantage point, we are leaving with the very best of intentions, because that story is what gets built over time. So I think you've got a really interesting opportunity. And again, I share that with all of you because here's a really practical example of just that question, what would be fun for me and where am I curious, actually uncovered a whole opportunity for an experiment.
Yeah.
Right? So that's my first question. You actually pre-answered, and I'm going to swap out to somebody else in a second. Ankar actually pre-answered the next question that I always ask when I'm doing an experiment, was where do I need to get smart? So naturally, the whole idea with an experiment is you're trying to fill a gap on knowledge. I think this is, I'm a big fan of podcasts, reading, YouTube, all of the digital assets. Specifically, and I will just throw this out there, I'm a huge fan of, especially those of you in technology, I'm a huge fan of the A16Z podcasts. That's the letter A, the number 16, and the letter Z. It's Andreessen Horowitz's podcast. I will tell you, I listen to that thing sometimes, and they talk about all sorts of emerging technologies and industry trends and where is the venture world going and what are they paying attention to. They had a whole conversation about this thing called GPT-3 the other day, which I'll be honest with you, I had no idea what it was at the beginning of the conversation, and I do at the end of the conversation. It's where I go as still a super nerd to get smart about things, but go source out who are the experts that you want to follow, whether it's on social media or in other media platforms that can help you be smart about your area of expertise. Now, I will also remind you, remember that fun thing first. Technology for me is super fun. I use it like Lego blocks. I like to play with things and build new things with technology, which means I have to teach myself about it. The other, and probably the most powerful thing you can do for yourself in this adventure called your career, is finding your experts, advisors, whatever you want to call them. Do note, I am not calling these people mentors. They are not professional career advisors. They are experts in whatever it is they do and how they think about things. And I will tell you, as somebody who I think I coded for a couple of weeks when I was 18, has not written a line of code since then, although I now call myself a no-code genius. I understand how technology is built and what is the process about building technology, because I've surrounded myself along my career with engineers who were willing to be my teachers. My first opportunity of actually building technology from scratch was early in the early 2000s. And I will be forever grateful to a super nerdy, didn't like to talk to people, very super introverted guy named Bill Vogel, who we literally did a Vulcan mind meld together. And I spent an enormous amount of time with him explaining to him the crazy of a sales organization. And he spent an enormous amount of time with me explaining to me, how do you architect a software platform? And the two of us together were not 1 + 1 = 2. We were like 1 + 1 = 100. And it was that learning process that not only taught me how to think about things, but also taught me how to have a conversation with an engineer who generally think I'm a little crazy. How to speak their language, et cetera, et cetera. And I've always gone out, and I think about a guy named Neil Mix, who is at Pandora. I've had these characters throughout my career who teach me about things, and it doesn't limit to just engineering. I think about how I now know what force majeure means and what sequential liability means, because I had a lawyer teach me about what is the power of language within legal documents. I had the amazing opportunity of having to help my organization get SOX compliance, and so spent far too much time with the finance organization and learned about what matters and what happens with them. And what that teaching relationship gives you, and being really open about how you are a student and how they can help you, actually means that in future iterations, you're actually able to accelerate that process. As an example, and I will never forget, when the controller at Pandora started, probably I'd say a year after I did, my job at the time was to be one of my jobs at the time was to actually mitigate issues between what the sales team wanted and what the finance team wanted them to do, which, if any of you have played that sort of role, it's a pretty contentious relationship at times. And I took the new controller out for, well, in his case, a beer, for me, a glass of wine. And I said, look, I said, here's the thing. I said, what you want the sales team to do and what the sales team want to do are often not the same thing. And I said, it's my job to come to you with problems that we need to solve and to push the envelope of how to solve those problems as far as it can go. I said, it is your job to tell me when I have pushed too far. And I said, so when I have pushed too far, I understand that if I make a mistake, I just get a smack on the hand. When you make a mistake, because I had learned from the SOX compliance piece that he could go to jail, that when you say, stop, you've gone too far, that we've really gone too far. And that one conversation, which went on a little bit longer, around my understanding of his motivation, his goals, what was in it for him, what risks he would be taking professionally if he made mistakes, et cetera, meant that within 24 hours of him starting, we had a much more trusted relationship, which then meant we could experiment more together. And none of that would have happened had I not had a controller in a previous career that had given me the teaching. So as you're thinking about, again, starting with what would be fun, who are the people who can be your teachers in this? I also throw back to you that you have the ability to be the teacher for others. And if you think about, like, how do you build influence, Green? How do you do all of these sorts of things? Is creating opportunities to be a teacher for other people is probably one of, especially when somebody gets it. Like, we've all had that opportunity when we've taught somebody something and they go, oh my God, I got it. Those are really personally satisfying moments for me. So how do you need to teach? So both outside resources, and then do you have a teacher that helps you along there? So next step, and I asked Ankur about this a little bit, is I then say, okay, now you know what it is you want to do and how you want to teach. You do need to be vocal about what it is you're doing, which is what I was talking to Ankur about. So coming in and making what I call the ask. And you see in your worksheet that I've actually given you a bit of a framework on how to make the ask. And FYI, we'd be really interested to hear from you. I've had a lot of requests from people for me to actually take everybody through what is the JOANNA'S sales training program, which is in essence, not sales training, but how do you teach other people what it is you have to offer so that they say, yes, please, I want that. Whether it is your brain, whether it's a product, et cetera, et cetera. There's a very, well, it's not a simple construct, but it is a construct that helps you help people to see that you have something that they may want to have. And do note, I said something very specific there. Sales has a bit of a reputation of, here's a thing I want you to have, please give me your money. That is not good sales. Good sales is, what is it you need to solve? Here's a thing I have that I think might solve it for you. Is this useful to you? Very slightly different nuance, very different result. And if you take that, is this useful to you approach, which is actually, I have a thing, I think somebody said the other day that the difference between a con man and a good salesperson is a con man convinces you to take the thing he has to give. No, actually, that's the wrong way around. Con man convinces you to give you what you have so that he can give you something he doesn't want. A salesperson helps you see the value of what it is he has to give to ultimately solve your problems. Different approach, same thing. So back to you and your construct. So there is a methodology, which we are not going to have time to get into today, around the ask. And so ping in the chat where you're like, please, can we unpack this some more if you want me to do a live show on this? So first of all, whenever I'm asking for something, I always start out with the why. And the why is, why is it important to them, not to you? So often when people come to ask me something, they go, I want to do X. Why is this important to me? Start there. Second, take a look, and before you actually start looking, take a look at what are the potential objections that they or somebody else might have for why you might not be able to do something. So as an example, I'm going to give you a really good example that we had just yesterday. So I was talking with a gentleman who was going through our executive one-on-one coaching program. And he came to me because he wants a promotion into the VP organization. And while we were going through an entire analysis of his situation and who were the moving players and what was his product and all that, one of the questions I asked him is, I said, okay, well, how many VPs in this sort of a role exist today? He worked for a very big multinational company, so there were lots of them. And he said, well, there's 6. And I said, okay. And I said, we had identified in the sales process of this guy that he was not your average character in the organization. He was actually very different. And I said, in the VP world, do any of the people that have the role today look like you or sound like you? And his answer was no. He goes, well, they might look like him, but they certainly didn't sound like him or lead like him. And I said, so, okay, so one of the company as a whole, because it's been around for decades, has a pattern of this type of character who looks like this and sounds like this is what our VPs look like. And you're coming in and saying, I want to be a VP and I look like this and I sound like something different. I said, the objection you are going to have to overcome first is, why should we actually break our mold of who it is we have historically hired for this type of opportunity and had fantastic results? This is an incredibly successful company. We've had results, like why they should use a different approach. And so we had a whole conversation about how to overcome that objection. And objections can be all sorts of things. It might be, you don't have the right experience. It might be, well, you don't look like them, you don't sound like them, which is a really tough one. There might also be in objections for experimenting. My favorite objections was we don't have the time, we don't have the resources. How do you overcome those objections without, but it's a really good idea, is not how to overcome that. Which brings me to the third idea, which is what is the potential? And so often people skip over this, and it's the same thing about your potential as it is about your idea's potential. Have you got alignment as you're presenting to what the potential is on the result of what it is you're doing? Now, it's not I'm absolutely expecting this result. It's, do we agree that the actually spending some time and attention in this area will deliver some future potential that we will find out? Often when people say no, it's because they don't see the potential. They haven't recognized it. You're not aligned there, which is why I always have the conversation about potential. And while I haven't said, look, here are the results we're expecting, I do always come back, and at the end of the why, the objection, the potential, is then come in and say, how am I going to report on this? What is it I am going to share with you as we go along with this experiment, with the insights and the learnings and what's working, or what surprises we have? Like, what is the reporting structure? This does not have to be heavy-handed. I'm not talking about some great, huge white paper or anything. You can literally say, hey, every Friday, I'm going to give you a little 2-sentence update on what we're learning along this. So as you're thinking about this, what is your reporting? Then you present your plan and your idea. That's the point. So now you've got alignment on why, you've mitigated the why nots, you've aligned on potential, you've aligned on the how. You can then say, look, this is the plan and this is what I want to do, because that's the thing that you want to say yes to. And if any of that top section, you're out of alignment on opportunity and why, they're never going to say yes to your idea to experiment to begin with. So don't even get to it until you've gotten to that point. And then last but not least, close for the idea. This is the number one thing. And if you went through my sales training back in the 2000s, you actually failed the test if you did not close. And what I mean by that is people ultimately need to hear a next step. They want to know, what is it we need to do to move forward? And so the very simple question of, do you see any reason why we can't move forward with this idea, is a really good closing statement. And when they say yes, then you say, great, here is what I'm going to do next. And then you go do it, right? If they come back with a no, it means that you have an objection you haven't uncovered and or mitigated at the end of the day, and you don't have alignment, which is how ultimately at the end of the day, you want to make sure that you can move forward. Because I also see quite a bit people who start experiments with the beautiful intention of, well, this will be valuable, but don't have buy-in along the way. And it's always great, not only to have buy-in, but just to have other ears who can help you, even if this experiment is just for you, as we saw with Ankur's example. Last thing I'm going to say on this is, as you are thinking about these experiments, especially if this is something new for you or you haven't done it before, or you are trying to build credibility around it, start small. Start smaller than smaller than smaller than small. Because if you think about when you have met people who seem to be able to get to do all sorts of crazy things, you know, I'm actually disappointed Aaron's not on the call today, because this is a conversation he and I have had, because he was like, he and I were peers back in the early 2000s, just in very different verticals. And I got to do lots of crazy things. And he was like, how is it you got to do that and I didn't? I was like, because I was out there breaking the rules all the time and doing experiments and playing with things. But what it ultimately built for me was trust in the organization, that if they needed something to be experimented on, it didn't matter what it was, they knew I would be able to take it through the process. And this is where I come back to this singular idea that experimentation can actually help you build your career, because it meant that I got assigned all sorts of crazy projects that were not on my resume. They were not what I was known for. They were not part of scope of my current role. But in every single scenario, I was given them because I was trusted to be a good experimenter. It was almost like I was an inventor inside the company. And it was that reputation that I was actually known for. And it was that thing that then built all of the tools and insights and information that allowed me to have impact as an executive further on. And I have no doubt you have all seen a character like me who has managed to get all of the kind of the crazy plum assignments or the cool, sexy stuff. And you're like, wait a second, why did they get that? It's because of that trust and relationship, in my opinion, that they've built over time. So start small and start to build that as part of your repertoire. And you'll find that not only, like Quing here, will you learn new things along the way, but you'll also figure out what is actually really important on all of this, what it is you want, so that you can bring value at the end of the day. So before I want to, here I wasn't going to do a lot of talking. What do I want to do? Because I don't want to run out of time. You know, I'm going to throw out my opportunity for an experiment first, and then I'm going to do a quick open for questions. So as you have all heard, I'm obsessed with experimenting, and I'm obsessed at the moment with the future of work. And as you also all know, I am on a mission to reinvent the resume because I don't think it serves either you or the person trying to hire you. I think they're terrible. They only talk about your past. However, we have found a company that has got a slightly different perspective about the resume. Because they understand that when it comes to the resume, it is a thing that we all need to use in this day and age, and that your resume needs to tell a story that matches the job description. What they also seem to understand is that the applicant tracking systems, so the software uses to import your resume, also has some really interesting nuance. A horrifying statistic that I learned from the CEO of this company when I interviewed her about this was that apparently the largest applicant tracking system in the United States importing all of your resumes is written in DOS. And for those of, those of you that don't know what DOS is, that's literally that green C prompt on a screen. I was kind of horrified when I learned that, but it is what it is. So anyway, this company has a AI technology that allows you to not only optimize your resume by applicant tracking system and all of the nuance that comes to it, but also creates a unique resume for every single job that you are applying for. And I think that, while it suddenly doesn't solve the problem, is a really interesting question. So we are offering up an opportunity to anybody who comes to we've sent this, and some of you may already have the email, opportunity for one of our participants in the Live with Joanna show to actually be our co-experimenter. And so we are going to fund for one person to get to put their resume in and use the technology, and we are going to watch them over their shoulder, and we're going to interview you, potentially even get quotes from you, and probably write an article and share our collaborative thoughts about, is this a step in the right direction around resumes? So if you are interested in being our co-experimenter, it's your time and your resume and your tenacity to apply for jobs that is going to be needed. We have dropped the link. It's the amplifylab.typeform.com in the chat room. I'll also be, and I think everybody should have gotten it, but we'll also be sending out the link to everybody who registered for the show today if you want to participate. So a unique opportunity, another reason to show up to the shows. So that was everything we wanted to share today. Before we go, as you're all still on, did anybody have any questions about experimentation in your career that we can help with? Okay, well, I'm gonna take that as we're all good. Well, so just a reminder, Oh, hang on. I see you waving, Lee. Are you leaving saying goodbye? So just a reminder, you're also all invited to go through the value experience if you need help with creating your value language. I know, Nicolette, you are just through the end of it. We had an amazing experience, and I know I have a follow-up with you. I'm overdue. I'm late. We'll get back to it. Just as a heads up on that, if you weren't aware, part of what we now offer with the Value Adventure is weekly office hours. We had a handful of people going through the experience this morning, and we had an awesome chat about their value. It's like you're getting group coaching and not group coaching at the same time. Everybody learns from everybody. It's super fun. You get the sparkles and it's all of that good sort of stuff. So if you are interested, always looking for people who want to join. Other than that,
wait 1 second, Joanna. We have our Wheel of Fortune.
Things. Roulette time.
Yes.
Go, Kelly. Thank you.
Okay.
So just a reminder, with your registration, somebody gets to win a one-on-one with me. Although we should take Peggy off the list. If she lands on Peggy, we're going to have to take her off, do it again, because she won last time. And it's still
Can everybody see?
Yep.
That wheel? Okay, great. Here we go.
Nordstrom ad. We can tell what you're shopping for.
Oh, it's anniversary sale time. What can I say?
And huzzah! Oh, when you win the winning session. Congratulations. We will be emailing you instructions on how to set that up and all of that good sort of stuff. So I'm looking forward to catching up. For the rest of you, as you know, you are entered every time to win to the live shows. Feel free to invite others. Thank you all for coming. Have a great weekend. And ultimately, we're here to help you figure out how to teach other people who the future you is so that you can be you in the future. Because the clearer you are about who you are, what you want, and teach other people why that's awesome, the more likely you get to be you. I know, it's a bit of a circle. I'm Joanna, your potentialist and fairy godmother, and I wish you the very best. Thanks for coming.